All right, let's take a look at the Week 5 quarterback prospect rankings for the 2025 NFL Draft. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. This is probably the most excited I have been for a prospect rankings reveal in quite some time because we had a decent amount of movement in this week's rankings. Like, we had 3 quarterbacks move up, some quarterbacks moving up more than one spot, and some quarterbacks dropping a little bit, some dropping a lot of bit. We had a new face in the top 10. We have an old face leaving. Like, there was just a lot of stuff going on this weekend, and I would implore you to go and check out the blog post. It will be down in the description below, so I'd appreciate if you guys went to go check that out, as well as all the other links in the description down below as well. But man, oh man, this week was fun. This was a very fun week of college football, and we had one of the games of the season, and I know we're only in Week 5, but I guess we're entering Week 6, but Week 5 from last week, I know we're only this early in the season, but I think we already had the game of the year between Alabama and Georgia. I was sitting there watching the game with my family, sitting there watching it, and I was like, oh yeah, I think Alabama being at home, knowing what I know about them this year, watching them against Wisconsin, like how quickly they can score. In Georgia, I mean, we saw them against Clemson Week 1, but the game against Kentucky made few people think a little bit differently about them. Maybe not like in regards to, oh, they can't compete for a national championship or anything, but in these types of games on the road at night, maybe you're looking at it a little bit different angle. And Alabama went out there and they blitzed them. Like, if you went away, if you went to the bathroom or went to go make yourself a cup of tea or whatever the hell you were doing, you would have blinked, and guess what? Alabama's up 28-0. Just like that. It just happened. Alabama is just up so ridiculously quick, it made no freaking sense. Like, again, I thought Alabama was going to win. I thought Alabama would win. Again, being at home, being a night game, knowing what we know about them this year, I thought they would win. But I never thought in my wildest dreams that we would see them up 28-0 against Georgia, against the Georgia Bulldogs. That's what Georgia does to Alabama, and then Alabama comes back and wins. Like, I remember when the national championship when Tua hit Devontae Smith in the end zone. That's what Georgia does, not Alabama. They're not the team that goes out to an early start like that. And much like that Georgia-Alabama national championship game, Georgia clawed their way back into the game. They took the lead. They were up for a little bit in this game, which again, after being down 28-0, it was not something I was really expecting. There was just so much unpredictability involved in this game that made it so much fun. And again, that's why I think it's already the game of the season. The season could end today, for all I'm concerned, in regards to picking the game of the year, because I don't think we're going to see a game like this. I don't think we're going to see a game like this. I don't know if we're going to see a performance from a quarterback like this. And Jalen Milroe, he had 374 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yes, he had an interception. Kind of I would say unfortunate interception, but also in the same breath, it wasn't a great throw from Milroe down in the red zone. But he also had 117 yards and 2 rushing and then 2 touchdowns to go along with that. And Alabama came out 41-43 victors. And why I'm signaling out this game to start our quarterback rankings list is because Jalen Milroe and Carson Beck, the 2 quarterbacks that played in this game, are both in these quarterback prospect rings. As you would know, previous weeks we've had Carson Beck somewhere around the 1 and 2 area. Jalen Milroe has been stuck at 6 since the beginning of the season. I can promise you right now that that is no longer the case. Carson Beck, yes, did not have a great first half. Did not. Had a really rough first half. Obviously had the interceptions. He had the fumble. He had the safety earlier with the intentional grounding penalty in the end zone. It was one of the roughest displays you could imagine from a top quarterback prospect, because in these types of games where your back's against the wall or you're playing a team like Alabama, you want to see how these quarterbacks raise their levels and boost everybody up. And when Carson Beck started to shrink a little bit, it was like, is he as good as what everybody thinks he is? Is he really a first-round quarterback? Which I've seen that discussed on Twitter at length during this game, throughout the game, and then after the stuff that's followed. And Carson Beck, I will give him credit. Though he struggled early in the game, and when I say struggled, he struggled really bad early in this game, he bounced back. He played really well in the second half. Yes, he had the interception at the end of the game that helped seal it. It wasn't a great throw. I mean, you have the bigger receiver against the true freshman corner, and you didn't give the really receiver a chance to make a play. You kind of just threw it up there and kind of hoped he'd bail you out because it wasn't a very good throw. In the end, Carson Beck managed to throw for 439 yards. And most of that is because they were losing 28-0, so you're not going to be running it as much. Like, I remember it was Bruce Arians when he was the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers talking about Jameis Winston's stats. going like, well, yeah, of course he leads the league in passing yards. We're losing every game, so we got to throw the ball a crap ton. That was kind of a similar situation here. But I do give Carson Beck a lot of credit for how he finished the game off, for how bad of a start it was. But, man, I can't sit here and lie to you. I do look at him a little bit differently than I did a week ago. And maybe that's unfair. Maybe that's completely unfair on my part to go like, oh, Carson Beck struggled against the Alabama Crimson Tide, as most 90% of the quarterbacks in college football, maybe 95% of the quarterbacks in college football would struggle in that exact situation. But again, when you're considered a top prospect, I want to see how you raise your level. I want to see, especially when you're going up against a quarterback that is playing a lights-out game and also is going to be available in your draft class. Like, that's what I want to see. I want to see the competition. I want to see how that works out. And it became a competition, but there was a stretch where it definitely wasn't. And I did drop Carson Beck down on this list. And I raised Jalen Milroe up this list. And I didn't really think before the start of the season that I was going to have this happen, but here we are. Now, that being said, I did make sure to note before the season started that Jalen Milroe is getting coached by Kalen DeBoer. And we saw what Kalen DeBoer and Michael Penix did with each other at Washington. Like, why could similar things not happen down in Alabama? Jalen Milroe's ceiling is really high. Jalen Milroe has obviously got the athletic ability. He's got the deep ball. And we saw that last year. In his rawest form, we saw him throw a pretty solid deep ball. It was just the intermediate stuff and the growth from the quarterback position as a passer that we would need to see going into this year. And again, the hiring of Kalen DeBoer I thought would help immensely with that, and it has. Jalen Milroe has been lights out this year. And after this game, we talk about like game of the season already being done and all that kind of stuff. Jalen Milroe, for all things considered, in my opinion, has one hand on the Heisman Trophy right now. He has one hand on the Heisman Trophy because, again, like I said with the game of the season, I don't know if we'll see a performance like this the rest of the year. I don't know if we'll see a quarterback total nearly 500 yards of offense with 4 touchdowns in a win against the number 2 team in the nation who hasn't lost in however many years in a regular season game. That wasn't something I was really expecting. And that's where we're at. And Jalen Milroe, we said at the beginning of the year, he could be a Heisman candidate because of the talent that he clearly has, and it's Alabama, so he's going to be one of the best. He's going to be quarterback in one of the best teams in college football. But man, the growth that we've seen from him this year from last year is immense. And I'm really happy to see how he's grown as a passer, how he's developed as a passer. Like, he's confident throwing the ball. He's not always looking to run. But that's what makes him so scary, is that now he's developing more as a pocket passer. But when he decides to run, guess what? He's good for 25, 15, 25, whatever the hell number you want to say, down the field. Like, he's just that good. And it's crazy to think that. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if he was the first quarterback taken in the draft. And you can kind of say that about a few quarterbacks in this draft class, because right now, there's not really a definitive number one quarterback. There's not really a definitive number one quarterback. Obviously, I have my opinions on it, but Joe Schmo down at the bar will have a completely different idea. This analyst on ESPN will have a completely different opinion about it. The GM of this team will have a completely different opinion about it. There's like 5 quarterbacks that I could see right now being potential first-round guys, but I also see there's a world where there could be only 1 quarterback taken in the first round. That's the volatility of this draft class this year. Like, if you were ranking the top 10 players in this draft class, would a quarterback be within that top 10? I know the need for a quarterback and the need for solid positioning at the quarterback position is massive, but in the same breath, is that enough to push some of these guys in the first round? Because like I brought up before, Will Levis, during the 2023 NFL draft, he went into the draft thinking he was going to be drafted 4th overall. He literally sat there and said, I wouldn't be here if I knew I wasn't going to get drafted high. Will Levis went from being the 4th overall pick in the draft to being the 2nd overall pick in the 2nd round. So what we're thinking right now with, there's going to be 5 quarterbacks taken, that could completely change. You look at the draft with Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, that draft class, people are expecting like Pickett, Willis, Desmond Ridder, Matt Corral. Like, these are guys that around this time of that season that were potential first-round guys. Kenny Pickett ended up being the only quarterback drafted in the first round, and the next quarterback was Desmond Ridder in the 3rd round. We had a whole round difference in quarterbacks, and the first quarterback taken in that year's draft was pick 20. So what we view the draft right now, like, teams need quarterbacks, Obviously, the position's important. It's the most important position on the football field, so that'll boost the position up. But it wouldn't shock me if there was 1 or 2 guys taken in the first round, even though at this point in time, it looks like we could have 5 guys taken in the first round. That's the crazy part. That's the fun part about the NFL draft as well. It's so unpredictable. It's not an exact science. It all just depends on what these teams are looking for. What if teams like the Panthers, what if they have they change their minds last second and go, you know what? We know we benched Bryce Young early on in this season, but we're going to go with him to start the next season. I highly doubt that, but it's a possibility. And speaking of that draft class, Will Levis, maybe the Titans are like, oh, we want to stick with Will Levis. Doesn't seem that way. It doesn't seem like Brian Callahan's necessarily the biggest fan of Will Levis, but it could happen. Maybe a team that doesn't want to draft a quarterback, but they need a new quarterback, they ended up signing like Sam Darnold or something. Like you look at the Raiders, like they were a team at the start of the season start of the offseason, that people would have looked at and said, oh yeah, you need a quarterback. Aiden O'Connell is fine, but that's it. That's his ceiling, is fine. He's not very good. He's not. And you went out and signed Gardner Minshew, who's the new age Ryan Fitzpatrick, where everybody loves having him on the team, but no one wants him really to be the starting quarterback. Long term, you want him to be like, if he's a starter, you're like, okay, for a season, or it's because someone got hurt. Like, you don't want him to be the long-term answer at quarterback, as solid as he is. And the Raiders are going to be one of those teams that's looking for a quarterback. The Giants with Daniel Jones, they're going to be a team that's looking for a quarterback probably this offseason. The Panthers we brought up, the Titans we brought up, the Browns could be looking for a quarterback this offseason. And there could be a complete anomaly team that goes out there and drafts a quarterback this year. Like we had the Atlanta Falcons after signing Kirk Cousins to a massive deal, draft Michael Penix with the 8th overall pick. So maybe we have a team like that too, where we weren't expecting them to draft a quarterback and they go right out there and draft one. It's crazy, crazy, crazy how the NFL draft works. But before we get too deep down that rabbit hole, let's take a look at the top 10 quarterbacks from this week's draft class, or this year's draft class, from this past weekend. We're going to speed run through a couple of them because, it's the last half of the picks, so we're not going to focus too much. I would like to focus on the top 5 in this draft class. But number 10, I kind of rotated this one around a little bit. We had Will Howard from Ohio State. He looked at the game he had against Marshall against Michigan State last week, He had 244 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, also had a rushing touchdown, 38-7 win on the road. He did pick up an injury in the game. And though it's not a bad performance, 38-7 win with 3 total touchdowns and 244 yards passing, that's pretty solid. But at number 10, I'm going to keep who we had at number 10 last week, was Riley Leonard. I like that he's starting to grow as a passer because it was kind of odd seeing the fact that Riley Leonard, who is one of the more talented quarterbacks in this draft class, really raw, especially with the deep ball, not throw a single passing touchdown until last week? Like, that was not something I really thought would happen. Yes, we knew he was a great athlete. We knew he was going to run the ball well, especially given Notre Dame, how Notre Dame wants to play football. He fits really well. This season, he has 7 rushing touchdowns and only 3 passing touchdowns. And 3 of those passing touchdowns have come within the past 2 weeks. Or 3 weeks. I can't remember when the first passing touchdown happened. But, yeah, 2 passing touchdowns in this game. Also had a rushing touchdown. So 3 total touchdowns, much like Will Howard. 52 yards rushing, 163 yards on the ground, and these ugly-ass Kelly Green, if you want to call him Kelly Green. Man, they're not, okay, I retract my statement. They're not ugly. They're not ugly, but Notre Dame should be wearing navy blue. That's Notre Dame. Notre Dame should not be wearing Kelly Green. If there was the Philadelphia Eagles, then yes, I would love those jerseys, but they're not. They're the Green Bay Packers. They're the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They need to wear navy blue and gold. White pants at Notre Dame does not sit well with me. And Notre Dame went out this weekend and beat number 15 Louisville 31-24. Riley Leonard again, good performance. He comes in at number 10. Number 9, Miller Moss from USC. Had a win against Wisconsin. Had a really solid second half. Much like we talked about with Carson Beck a little bit before, to not that extent, but Miller Moss really stepped up in the second half. You saw the game against Michigan where he got a little flustered, kind of forced the issue a little bit. This game in the second half against Wisconsin, you saw him a little bit more calm and collected. He had 3 passing touchdowns, had a rushing touchdown in there as well. 308 passing yards in this game. He has 8 touchdowns on the year, 1,100, just under 1,200 passing yards. Nice little win. Get right on track on Big Ten play. So obviously, again, he lost to Michigan last week coming off the bye. A lot of people out there thought USC would go into Ann Arbor, go into the Big House, and come away with a win against the Michigan Wolverines. And ultimately, it didn't end up happening because of, like we mentioned before, Miller Moss getting pressured a little bit, making him a little uncomfortable. Michigan ran the ball really well. Like, it didn't really work out for Miller Moss in that game, but this was a nice bounce-back game, and he comes in at number 9 in this week's rankings. Almost had him at number 10. I rotated with Will Howard, with Riley Leonard, with Miller Moss. Like, I rotate with those 3 guys. So it was something that, very fluid. It's very fluid at the bottom of the list. But number 9, dropping down 1 spot, is Jackson Dart. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky this past week, and I don't think a lot of people were expecting that. 20-17 loss at home. Kentucky has been a very odd team this year. So remember, they got blown out by South Carolina at home earlier in the year. Then they had that close encounter with Georgia at home at night. And then they go out and they beat the 6th-ranked team in the nation in Ole Miss, or 5th-ranked, whatever they were at the time. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Ole Miss let them into their house, and Kentucky came in and beat them. That's not fun. That's really not that fun. And Jackson Dart and Ole Miss, their offense was humming through the first 4 weeks of the season. Absolutely humming. Like, I believe they scored 77 points week 1 or something like that. They dropped 50 on occasion this year too. Like, they were absolutely cooking on all fronts on the offensive side of the ball. But this week, they just couldn't get anything going. Kentucky had a few long drives this game that really hurt Ole Miss's offense. And Jackson Dart as a whole, he had 261 passing yards with a touchdown. Didn't have an interception. Didn't have any rushing touchdowns either. Only had 22 yards on the ground, which is not very high for someone who can get some more yards on the ground like Jackson Dart can. But the thing that I didn't like, he made some good throws. There was one prayer that he had later in the game. It was like 4th down and something. He had to just launch it down the field. And it ended up being a catch, but the defender didn't really make a great play on the ball. And again, it was a weird play. It was one of those let it go and hope type things. Just like throwing up an absolute prayer. But on 4th down, and you're losing the game, you need to try and make something out of nothing. You've got to force it down the field, because if you throw an interception, at that point, it doesn't really matter, because you're going to turn the ball over on downs anyways. So you might as well just give your receiver some chance on the ball. But what was kind of weird was the latter part of that drive, where he took a sack, which is something you cannot do in that situation, get them out of field goal range. So he had the deep ball, got him in field goal range, then he takes a sack, gets him out of field goal range. And then, yes, they get an offsides penalty, draws him offsides, and he's running down the sideline. And I understand he might have known there was a flag coming in. I think he saw the flag on the field. But you can't be that lackadaisical with the ball. I don't care if there's a flag on the play, you know you're going to get the ball back, but you just don't hand the ball back to the defense, because what if they just pick up the flag? Or actually he got back in time, they all communicate, and they're like, he got back in time, that's actually not that big of a deal. What if that happened? I know it didn't, but what if it did? And we could play if, buts, and maybes and all that stuff. I know that's a very fun game to play here, but yeah, I thought he played all right, but there were some things in this game that I wasn't a huge fan of from Jackson Dart, and we'll see how he bounces back. They're playing South Carolina this week. He brought him up against Kentucky. It's on the road. Next week's game, though, I'm really excited to see, because it's LSU versus Ole Miss, Garrett Nussmeier versus Jackson Dart. It should be a very fun one. Speaking of Garrett Nussmeier, he comes in at number 7. 2 touchdowns, 409 yards passing against South Alabama. I thought South Alabama would put up a little bit more of a fight. Not necessarily on the defensive side of the ball. I knew LSU was very high-powered on offense. They scored 2 touchdowns in 3 plays in this game. They're a high-powered offense. Garrett Nussmeier is playing really well this year. Right now, he has 15 touchdowns to his name at this point. LSU will score a lot of points this year, but I just thought South Alabama would score. I didn't think they'd stop him, but I thought they'd score. And Garrett Nussmeier, he did have a couple interceptions in this game, and Garrett Nussmeier has this thing called arm arrogance, where he thinks he can fit every single ball in every single window, no matter how big or small it may be. He's going to try and make the throw because he believes he can, because he's got the strongest arm in college football, or at least one of the strongest arms in college football. And there was one play he had where he stepped up in the pocket, which I thought was very good for him. Stepping up in the pocket, rolling a little bit to the right, and he tried to get to his receiver on the sideline, who was fairly open if he got enough on it, but he didn't get enough on it and ended up getting intercepted because there's a defender between himself and the receiver. Threw it right to him. Easily intercepted. It's just a hard throw to make, especially on the move. It's not the easiest throw in the world. And the second interception came in the red zone. Threw it again. Tried to fit it between 2 defenders and ended up getting intercepted. Not great stuff, but he made some really good throws. He had a couple seam shots in this game that were really good. Up the seam to the tight end. He had a touchdown to Lacey that was really good. He can make... Placement is not a problem for Garrett Nussmeier. Again, when you have an arm as strong as Garrett Nussmeier's, placement's never been an issue. There's a throw that he had to... Who was it? Not Kyron Lacey. He was the tight end. Who... For Aaron Anderson was the touchdown that he had later after the tight end caught the ball. I can't remember who it was who caught the ball on the seam route and the tight end, but Garrett Nussmeier placed it right over the defender's shoulder. right over the arm of the defender. Like, that's what you want to see. Placement. You can hear the ball in a stadium like Tiger Stadium, which is 100,000, 90-plus thousand people. You can hear the ball hum from Garrett Nussmeier. That's how good of an arm he has, and he definitely has arm arrogance, which can get you into trouble at times. But if you have an arm to make it through all those holes, maybe you're actually a lot better. Maybe you should try that. At least he's trying something, I guess you could say. But you want to dial that back a little bit. But you usually get that with quarterbacks with strong arms. And Drew Aller comes in at number 6, dropping down one spot as well. Not based off performance. He just didn't need to do a whole lot in this game. It was a good old-fashioned Big Ten game. It was 21-7. It was 7-7 at halftime. Now, it looked like it was going to be a high-scoring game because both Illinois and Penn State scored in their first 2 drives of the game. Or first drives of the game, not first 2. First drives of the game. And Drew Aller made some good throws in the game, but it was basically an Allen and Singleton show running the ball. They had about 200 yards rushing between the two of them. Like, it was just a good old-fashioned Penn State run-the-ball type game. Drew Aller in this game didn't have any touchdowns, didn't have any interceptions. 135 yards, 15 yards on the ground as well. He can be effective in the run game. He's not the most fleet-footed guy out there. It's not the most graceful thing ever watching Drew Aller run the football, but he can be effective. He's a big-bodied guy. Now, just because he's big-bodied, I don't want to see him try to run over a defender or try to drive his shoulder through the defender's chest. That's not really something I want to see from my quarterback. Again, I don't care how big you are. I don't want to see my quarterback doing that. Simple? Got it? But he can make Drew Aller's another quarterback, much like Garrett Nussmeier, that has arm arrogance. That feels like he can make every single throw on the football field, and sometimes it can get him into trouble, but sometimes it can make some of the most ridiculous throws you'll see. Like putting it absolutely on a frozen rope is something Drew Aller does quite consistently. And in this game, we didn't need to see him do that as much, but he still made some plays when he needed to. Again, 15 of 21 in this game, didn't turn the ball over. Drew Aller's got some growth to do. We might see him stay this next year, and he could be one of the top quarterbacks in next year's draft. Maybe that's what we're looking at for Drew Aller at his time at Penn State. Or maybe he does come out this year. He's got the talent. I wouldn't be shocked if he decided to go back next year and develop again, because you've seen the development this year. Drew Aller had good statistics last year, but his growth this year has been very, very impressive to see, and I hope he continues on that the rest of the season. And they play UCLA this upcoming week, and UCLA is the worst passing defense in the Big Ten. So this could be a game for Drew Aller to flex his muscles. UCLA is a pretty middle-of-the-road run defense, which stopping a team like Penn State running the ball is a lot easier said than done, but still, he's able to flex his muscles in this game, throw the ball a little bit like we saw him do against Kent State last week. Like, I know it's UCLA. Comparing UCLA to Kent State, that's a little mean. I do apologize. Even though UCLA's trash this year, I do apologize. It's a little too rough. But he could have a good game this week. And then entering the top 5, number 5 is Quinn Ewers, dropping down 2 spots. He's been hurt the last 2 weeks. This isn't based off anything he's done. He just hasn't played. And as you know, the best ability is availability. So we had to drop him down a few spots. Still in the top 5, though. He's back to where he was preseason rankings, where he entered the season number 5. We'll see if he plays this week or next week. Texas is on a bye. He has an oblique injury. He didn't play last week against Mississippi State. Texas had a very weird game against the Bulldogs. They only won the game 35-13. I say only, but they were like 35-point favorites in this game. So not the greatest game in regards to what was the spread, but hey, it was solid enough. Arch Manning in the game had a pretty solid game, but we need to see Quinn Ewers back on the field. This is something that could stick with him in the draft process because he has had a weird injury history while at Texas. He has missed time in the past 3 seasons. So we're going to need to see how that affects his draft stock once the draft ends up rolling around in April and how he does in the interview process and stuff like that. Number 4, on this list is Carson Beck. We talked about this a little bit before. Good arm from Carson Beck, but you saw early on in the game he struggled. He got flustered. I don't want to say he was Sam Darnold out there seeing ghosts, but he wasn't seeing his receivers very well. He's forcing the ball a little bit. We talk about the fumble. We talk about the intentional grounding call in the end zone. Like, it was just not a good game overall from Carson Beck in the first half, early on the second half, but we saw him grow into the game. And like we talked about earlier, you want to see your quarterback step up in these types of situations where you're playing against a team in Alabama on the road at night against the quarterback that you're going to be competing directly with in regards to draft position. You want to see how you raise your levels to that. And early on, it looked like he was shrinking, and that's not what you want to see. But in the second half, when his back was against the wall, when everybody was doubting him, when he was having a rough-ass game, he stepped up. So I do commend him for stepping up in the second half, but that first half was just, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. So he drops down 2 spots to number 4. We're going to need to see him bounce back and see how he does as a full game against Auburn. Second straight game for Georgia against an Alabama team. SEC play for them has not been great up to this point. They obviously barely beat Kentucky, beat them by 1 last week or 2 weeks ago. And then you have the game against Alabama this week. The score line is nice. The second half performance was nice, and he made some good throws in the second half. But the interception at the end, the 3 interceptions in total, it was a rough game overall. But we'll see how he bounces back for this. That'll be a true test of how good of a quarterback he is going into the draft. Number 3, I tiptoed around number 2 and 3 on this list quite a bit. And I ended up putting Jalen Milroe at number 3, and I have Cam Ward at number 2. And starting with Jalen Milroe, like we talked about at the beginning, his development as a passer in the intermediate games is so impressive. We always known he's got a good deep ball. We always known he's very athletic. He could run the ball really well. Like, he's got all the tools to be a very good quarterback. And I wouldn't be shocked, like we said, if he was the first quarterback taken in the draft. He keeps going on the season like he has up to this point. He's got one hand on the Heisman Trophy already, and he just makes some good throws. He makes some good throws. They had a wheel route in one play in the first half, and it was a perfectly thrown wheel. Yes, the linebacker reacted late to the motion, which allowed him to get a little bit more free in the secondary, but you still have to float that in there right over the top shoulder to the defender. And then running the ball. You know how hard it is to outrun Georgia, the most athletic defense in all of college football for the God knows how many years in a row now? And Jalen Milroe is pulling away from them as the quarterback? Like, I don't know what his direct comparison would be for the NFL. I know a lot of people have been comparing him to Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts I've seen a little bit of. I don't know what his direct comparison would be at this point in time. All I can tell you is that this game against Georgia was damn impressive. Damn impressive. And again, the interception was a little unfortunate from Milroe, but he made so many good throws throughout the game. Like, there was a couple times where Georgia defenders are barreling down on him in the pocket, and he stands tall in the pocket. And when you have a quarterback that's as mobile as Jalen Milroe, sometimes when pressure barrels down on him, they're looking to run the ball. They're going to try and reverse out or try to extend the play and try to make something done with their feet and maybe throw the ball. If they don't throw it, then guess what? They're going to try and make a play with their feet. Jalen Milroe stands in the pocket, and that shows the development that we talked about with him as a passer. And I'm intrigued to see how it goes the rest of the year. In Alabama this week, they got Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt. And it just always reminds me of the clip of, Vanderbilt when they're like, Alabama, you're next, and Jalen Hurts goes, theoretically, we are next on the schedule. Like, that clip's that's college football heritage right there. That is one of the greatest clips in all of college football history. that theoretically we are next on the schedule, and then Alabama wins this game 50-something or whatever. Like, it's just great stuff. Number 2 on this list is Cam Ward. Again, you could flip Cam Ward and Jalen Milroe all around you want. It doesn't matter to me. Cameron Ward made some ridiculous plays against Virginia Tech, and he had some interceptions in this game as well. He threw 2 interceptions. They started off really hot, Miami. Really hot. He fumbled on the first drive of the game, but after that, you saw him score 3 straight touchdowns. You saw him hit seam routes. Like, he's just got excellent anticipation. He's so calm in the pocket that it's almost insulting at times. And they had a touchdown in this game where they faked the draw, and he lobbed it over the top to Arroyo, I believe it was. Yeah, with a 43-yard touchdown. Like, that's just mean. I don't know. I've seen that play run before. I don't think I've ever seen it run as effectively as that, where Arroyo was as wide open as he was. I just didn't expect to see that. I really didn't. And then we see throws to Xavier Restrepo, with Ward and Restrepo looking very good so far this season. They have a very good chemistry. But Restrepo also, Cameron Ward did try to hit him in the red zone, and he just got baited into throwing an interception. It's not really what you want to see. It's not the worst thing in the world, because you're going to get baited every once in a while. It's just your job to rectify that and figure out how to bounce back from that. But it wasn't great. It wasn't great. Not the greatest interception of all time, but you know what? It happens. And he had an interception later in the game where he tried to float it up again to Restrepo. It's a constant theme here, because Restrepo's kind of his get-out-of-jail card. Restrepo's a very solid receiver, so he's going to try and get it to him more often than not, but this one, it was just behind him. If he floated it more towards the pylon, the front pylon, maybe he does get a touchdown. But with 2 defenders in the area, you have to get more on that ball. Just not a great throw from Cameron Ward, but you look at some of the plays he made, like on 3rd down, early in the game, 3rd and 15, rolling out to his right. I say stiff arms a D tackle because it adds to the effect a little bit, but making a play on the defensive line, being aware enough to check the sideline to make sure he has enough room to work with on the sideline before delivering it down the field to get 16 yards on 3rd and 15. We saw him do a little shovel pass to the tight end at the end of the game when he was about ready to get sacked, when he was dead to rights in the backfield. Like, he made so many great plays in this game. And again, he's so anticipatory when throwing the football. He's so good at throwing it on time. He does not wait for another window to open up. If he sees a window that he likes, he's going to zip the ball in there. He's got a great arm, and he's not like, I don't know if you would say he's like Jalen Milroe in regards to the athlete, but Cameron Ward can freaking move. Cameron Ward can move. He's a great athlete. Like, you saw against, I think it was either Florida A&M or Ball State, I can't remember which one, where he had the diving touchdown at the pylon. Like, he's a very good athlete. He made Virginia Tech pay a few times with his legs in this game. And his mobility, sometimes when you think of mobility, you just think running down the field. But his pocket mobility is very impressive. His awareness in the pocket is very impressive. And I'm excited to see how he continues to go the rest of the year. Because right now, as much as I would say Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty could very well be and probably should be the two front runners for the Heisman, it's a quarterback award at this point. Right now, the Heisman race is between Jalen Milroe and Cameron Ward. And Cameron Ward at this point with Miami is looking freaking awesome and freaking unstoppable at this point. And this week they're going on the road. Classic ACC matchup against Cal. So we'll see how they do there. Cal obviously lost to Florida State. Florida State's only win of the season is to Cal. Now that wasn't Tallahassee. We'll see how Miami does traveling to Berkeley in this game. Marshawn Lynch will be the guest picker on College Game Day. So the omens are not looking great for Miami at this point. But that being said, Miami's offense is just too high power. I think Miami will be fine. But Cameron Ward in this game, speaking of this game in general, he looked really, really good. And then number one is Shedeur Sanders. He's been number one on this list for a little bit now. He's been number one on the ranking since week 3. He's been number one on this list since 4 of the first 5 weeks of the season. Made some good throws in this game. And I think what's nice with Shedeur Sanders, what I think is his best trait, probably, or arguably, I guess I should say, is his ability to roll it to the left. That's not something right-handed quarterbacks are really comfortable doing most of the time, but Shedeur Sanders makes it so effortless, and 90% of the time when he does roll it to the left, he's going to take a shot. He's going to take a shot, and his awareness in the pocket is getting better. There's sometimes he's a little late on throws. He threw an interception in this game as well, like the other quarterbacks we've mentioned at this point. Like, this is the 4th straight quarterback we have mentioned that has thrown an interception in a game. And much like Cameron Ward was Xavier Restrepo forcing it to him, Shedeur Sanders, he can get a little bit issue of forcing it to Travis Hunter, which I can't blame him. Travis Hunter's probably the best overall player in college football. I would force it to him a little bit too. But you got to be on time. You can't force in the double coverage. You can't throw across your body, and that will lead to interceptions. It was just not a great play from Shedeur Sanders, but he made some great plays throughout the course of the game as well, just in general. Like rolling out to the left. Again, he's just so comfortable doing that. Reversing out to his left. He's very comfortable doing that. He's not afraid to take hits. And he had that throw, like we're talking about, the one where he rolled out to the left to Travis Hunter, the non-interception. Travis Hunter got a little face mask penalty, or the UCF got a face mask penalty than Travis Hunter. Like, it's just plays like that go, okay, yep, he is the top quarterback in this draft class. And it's not just because, I know people might not like Shedeur Sanders. They might not like Colorado, and that's fine. But you can't doubt the talent that Shedeur Sanders has. And I think his awareness in the pocket is getting better. He's looking more comfortable as a runner, too. He might not be the world-class athlete that his dad was, but Shedeur Sanders is looking more and more comfortable running the ball. We see him break off a few more 10-plus yard carries, and that's what you want to see. I like seeing that from Shedeur Sanders. You want to see some mobility in your quarterback. You don't want to be just meat statures in the pocket. That's not what you want. And then in this game where Colorado opened the game as 12.5-point dogs on the road against UCF, and they come out winning 48-21, with Shedeur Sanders throwing 290 yards, 3 touchdowns, also 15 yards on the ground, 28 of 35 in this game. He has 14 touchdowns on the season. He had a passing touchdown in this game where he basically just kind of threw it up and told Shepard to make a play. And Shepard did. Shepard definitely did. He had a passing touchdown to Travis Hunter on a little, I guess you could say, deep dig route, if that's what you want to call it. Great throw from him there. Like, he just looked really solid, really comfortable in this game. Again, the interception was not great, but again, pretty much every quarterback on this list threw an interception this week. Like, Sanders threw one, Cam Ward threw one, Milroe, Beck, Nussmeier, Miller Moss. There's 6 quarterbacks right there that thrown a pick. So I'm not really going to lambast him for throwing an interception. It wasn't a great interception, but there were worse ones thrown this weekend. But that is our week 5 quarterback prospect rankings. We'll go through the top 10 again. Sitting at number 10, we have Riley Leonard from Notre Dame. I don't know if we said who they're playing this week, but Notre Dame will be taking on nobody. They're on a bye. Then we got Miller Moss at USC at number 9. They're playing at Minnesota, which could be a very interesting game. We got Jackson Dart coming in at number 8 when they play South Carolina on the road. We got Garrett Nussmeier, who's on a bye this week at number 7. Again, that matchup against Ole Miss next week will be very, very fun. We got Penn State and Drew Aller at number 6 taking on UCLA. Number 5, we have Quinn Ewers on a bye week. We'll see if he comes back to action next week. Carson Beck and Georgia will be playing Auburn. Carson Beck comes in at number 4, dropping down 2 spots. Jalen Milroe raises up 3, and this week they're playing at Vanderbilt, so I'd expect his good numbers to continue. I know Vanderbilt's better than what they have been in the past, but still Alabama versus Vanderbilt. I'll believe it when I see it type thing. Then we got Cameron Ward coming in at number 2. And Miami plays at Cal in a classic ACC matchup. And then at number 1, we have Shedeur Sanders, who is on a bye week this week. Other players that we have in the honorable mention section, obviously we have Will Howard in there because he dropped down from the spot last week. We brought him up before with his performance against Michigan State. We have Noah Fafita in there, 2 touchdowns in their win against Utah. We have Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, 3 touchdowns with 278 yards against UCLA. Cade Klubnik from Clemson, he had 4 touchdowns in a 40-14 victory over Stanford. And then Curtis Rourke from Indiana, formerly of Ohio. Indiana looks really good this year. They're fun to watch. They're ridiculously fun to watch. Curtis Rourke, 359 yards, 3 touchdowns. Yes, he had 2 interceptions, but with a 42-28 win, 11 touchdowns on the year, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Yes, both coming this week, but it was a fun game. And Indiana's a fun-ass team to watch. So if you haven't watched Indiana play this year, I would very much recommend it. But that is our Week 5 quarterback prospect rankings. Again, check out the link in the description below for the blog post. Check out all the links to the social media accounts as well down below. And yeah, I will see you guys later. Peace.